So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Kate, and I'm a business development manager in the professional development team at Cardiff University. I'm really delighted to have so many of you with us this afternoon, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to hearing some more about web application security from Yulia in the School of Computer Science and Informatics. Just a reminder before I hand over to Yulia that if you would like to ask any questions as you go through, then please use the Q&A function, and we will sort of take your questions perhaps in two sections. I think sort of midway through we might have a break and review some questions, and then again at the end. So that'd be great to receive your questions. Okay, now I'd like to introduce you to Yulia, who's going to take today's session. So thanks very much, Yulia.
Thank you, Kate. I will share my screen with everyone now. And there we go. You should be able to see the slides. Quick introduction. Once again, I'm Dr. Yulia Cherdantseva. I am a lecturer at the School of Computer Science and Informatics. I am a researcher in cybersecurity. I do research in this area, and I've been doing it for the last 10 years. And I teach cybersecurity at the National Software Academy. Today we have a 1-hour session focused on cybersecurity, and then we'll move to web application security. Just knowing that the audience has different level of knowledge about cyber, so I thought that we'll start with a very basic introduction to cybersecurity, looking at a bit of history behind cyber, looking at some key terminology and some kind of main principles of cyber. And the second part would be more focused on web application security. I'll try to finish in about 15 minutes and to leave 10 minutes for questions. So as Kate just said, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section. If you don't get your question answered, I'll try my best to answer all of your questions. But if I don't have a chance to answer your question, feel free to get in touch. My email address could be found on the slides, or just Google me and you'll land on my page. Feel free to drop me a message and to ask any outstanding questions after the session. As I said, quick outline. So talking about cybersecurity and the key principles and key terminology to begin with, then some short introduction to web application security. And towards the end of that part, I will mention about our forthcoming CPD course as well. As you all know, cybersecurity is all over the news recently. so many attacks hit the news, particularly supply chain attacks recently. They become more and more popular when through SMEs, through small and medium-sized enterprises, cyber criminals get into larger company. So that's one of the recent examples, or quite a lot of recent examples. They show cyber attacks through supply chain. To give you a bit of feel, how did we get here? So we started with computer security in around 1950s, mid of last century, when computers became more popular. And it really remained computer security for about 40 years then. And it's only in around 1990s, people started to talk about information security. And the reason it became information security rather than computer security is that information suddenly became more important and more valuable than computer systems that were processing that information. Then in around 2000s, cybersecurity became a very hot topic and a buzzword. And up until now, we have cybersecurity, no change of terminology as yet. I'll go through the slides and then I'll explain why we have cybersecurity and what's the difference between information and cybersecurity. So with computer security, the focus was on the equipment itself. Computers were very rare, they were valuable by themselves. So it's just the machine that was valuable, and it was the actual computer that needed protection. And most of the protection was about physical protection. It's just lock the room where you have that very expensive computer. And ultimately, it was about access control, accessing control to the equipment, as I said, through physical means and some logical algorithms as well. And that's where the first models, access control models like Bell-LaPadula model emerged, which explain or develop a proposed algorithm for accessing information, for controlling access to information. Some first viruses emerged at the same time. So 1971, so we have Creeper, one of the first self-replicating programs. It didn't do anything particularly malicious. The only thing it did was presenting that message, I'm the Creeper, catch me if you can. So there was no really any malicious intent in that, and no particularly bad effect of that particular virus. When we move to information security, sorry, I think there we go. When we move to information security, it was the time when personal computers became more popular. They were less expensive. People could afford to buy a computer to have it at home. Computer networks appeared, the emergence of the internet, and that's the time where the first, what we now call cybersecurity countermeasures started to appear, like firewall and encrypted traffic, because networks, the newly emerging networks, they required protection. In 1988, we had Morris Worm. You probably all heard about it, and that was a big deal at the time. It was again a self-replicating program, and it caused a massive disruption to the internet of that time. So really, it slowed down to the crawl. Nothing could be done, and I think the entire internet at the time was down for about 2 days. I think it took them 48 hours to fix the problem. So the guy actually didn't have malicious intent in mind. So he was a student, and he was actually a son of a person who developed Android systems, Unix system. So he was quite aware about what was going on. And what he said, he tried to measure the size of the internet. So he wanted to see how big the network is. And he developed that worm so that it would propagate from one computer to another and just to do the basic count of the machines on the network. But what happened, it was replicating itself much more aggressively than initially anticipated. And it was running multiple versions of the same virus on the same machine, and machine would be again and again infected with the virus. And ultimately, all the internet was very slow and unfunctional. So that's 1988. 2000s, everything is online. Smartphones, cloud computing, big data, and really cybersecurity moves to a new level. So new challenges, new ways of working and new challenges, and cybersecurity becomes really focused on the online world, on the protection of cyberspace, and ever more it becomes very, very technical and very complex. So there are lots of live cyber threat maps. You can have a look online. So this is just one of the examples, and there is a link at the end. And you would see that a huge number of attacks, literally, you cannot count them, and it counts as, I think over here we have 19 million attacks just which happened on that particular day. And it's only one company who counts the attacks. So in reality, there would be many more of those attacks happening. An infrastructure of any company, any larger company, would be under constant threat from possible attacks from cyber criminals. And it's something that happens on a daily basis, and really every minute. Even Cardiff University infrastructure would experience thousands of attacks. Let's look at the terminology a little bit. So what is specifically cybersecurity? And we are looking at definitions from some American standards here, from NIST standards, and it's the ability to protect or defend the use of cyberspace from cyber attacks. So in this definition of cybersecurity, this focus on the cyberspace is very important. Interestingly, cybersecurity is not limited to technology alone. So it would include processes and administrational measures as well. It is a very complex discipline, and it requires knowledge of many related areas, which I will mention in a second. It requires understanding of the theoretical, foundational computer science principles. It requires some in-depth practical hands-on knowledge of technology, and really the ability to react promptly and rapidly to emergency situations. So really for cybersecurity professionals, in some sense, it is a certain mindset. It is a certain ability to react to some extreme and emergency situations. I've mentioned information security and cybersecurity as a progression in the evolution of the discipline. But those two terms, they're both in existence. So we have both information security and cybersecurity at the same time. And cybersecurity, as we see it, is a subset of information security. As I've mentioned, cybersecurity focuses on the cyberspace, on the digital world, on the networks, on computer networks, on the protection of digital information. Whereas information security is a much broader term, is a much broader discipline, and it would address protection of information irrespectively of the realm. So it doesn't have to be digital information. It may be related to protection of any sort of documentation. It may be verbal information, it may be written information or paper-based information. We would protect all that information. And the means of protection, again, are not limited just to the technical countermeasures, but it would include legal actions, for example. It would include awareness training for personnel within a company, and it would include organizational protection measures as well. Looking at the broader picture, obviously information security and cyber security, they are part of the risk management culture within an organization. It will have a strong overlap with business continuity as a discipline. And of course, information technology as a discipline has a significant overlap, and really it's a basis for cybersecurity. So that's where information and cybersecurity sit within a broader context. So why is it so important? Why all the buzz around cyber and information security? Information, as of the last 20 and 30 years, became really a key asset for organizations. If you think about larger companies, or if you think about companies such as Facebook and Google, so what do they sell? So they sell information. If you think about big data, all the data which are collected, and we do all the analysis and try to understand the world based on big data, again, information is the key asset for those companies. So the information itself became really important, and it plays a significant, a strategic role for business development. It is, of course, due to the dependence of organizations on ICT infrastructure, digital transformation. So many companies already embraced or embracing digital transformation. And through that digital transformation, it should always happen in a secure fashion. So security becomes more important as more companies transform towards digital business. The impact of cybersecurity breaches, they have very tangible effects on businesses. For some businesses, it would be devastating and detrimental, and really it will ruin the business. Looking at the statistics, you would see that after a company has been discussed with regard to a cybersecurity breach, obviously share prices would go down, and there will be a very noticeable effect on the market price of the company. So it's something that is seriously taken by companies nowadays. The cost of a security breach or a security incident itself typically is quite large, and it grows. And for SMEs, for example, in the UK, according to the recent survey, just the average, the mean cost of an incident is around £5,000. So which for SME, for a small company, may be quite a significant sum of money. And obviously there will be a larger incidents. And more of our activities take place online. So we shop online, we communicate online, we learn online nowadays. And so with all the remote working, it becomes really important in our lives, and hence more targeted by cyber criminals. So all those are the factors which make cybersecurity more and more important in our daily life and our work life as well. So the paradigm shift, and I've mentioned computer security and how computer security became information security when we started to value information more than the devices which host that information. So that paradigm shift happened in 1990s. And I'm currently running a project with SMEs on the attitude, and it partially covers the attitude towards cybersecurity. And I was looking at this site and at this particular slide, and I thought, I'm saying that this shift happened, but I think it's not quite true. What we need to say is that at that time, people started to realize that cybersecurity is more than just a technical issue. It is a business level need, and it should be a business level objective. However, that understanding has not yet translated into action in every single company. So there is quite a lot of room for improvement in that area. But if you're thinking about the ideal world, so what we need to say is that we all should understand that technology alone is not an answer to information security and cybersecurity problem. So it's way more complex than just something that could be solved by installing a firewall and making sure that your antivirus software is up to date. So there are many more activities that need to be undertaken for a company, for example, to be secure. So there are business needs that cybersecurity should be aligned with. There is human factor that needs to be taken into account, and economic incentives are always important. And cybersecurity is not excluded from that. So cybersecurity could only be implemented if companies and if people see that there are some incentives behind that, and that there are some incentives pushing people towards being more secure and pushing companies towards being more secure. And in reality, a comprehensive and multidisciplinary approach to protecting information is required. So we should not just see it as a technical issue alone. And I really like to start any of my courses on cybersecurity, and I teach a lot of technical aspects, like web applications, a very technical topic. But I always started with this explanation that technologies alone is not a solution. You cannot solve the problem by technology alone, and it's much more complex problem. So I wanted to mention Bruce Schneier. So he's, I would say he's a security philosopher. He's a practitioner, of course, as well, and he was involved. He is one of the co-authors of one of the encryption algorithms, which is popular at the moment. And he talks a lot of sense about cybersecurity, and it's more at a higher level. So I'm not talking about his technical work, but generally his philosophy about cybersecurity is very interesting, and I think it's well aligned with what I think as well. And he's saying, and I've got a couple of his quotes, is that security is not a product, but a process. And that designing strong cryptography into a system is not going to be a solution. So it's designing the entire system that all security countermeasures, including cryptography, work together. That's a real challenge. And another quote, and I already mentioned it in the previous slide, and he said it as well, that if you think technology can solve your security problem, then you don't understand the problems and you don't understand the technology. So I got his book on my desk, and with his personal autograph. And if you're interested in kind of this attitude towards cyber, so there are plenty of his videos on YouTube, and if you want to follow on that, that's quite an interesting person to follow in terms of cyber. Talking about this multidimensional nature of cybersecurity, as we moved away from just a technical view on cyber, there are lots of different aspects which are involved, and I've got a list here, and it may be dimensions related to corporate governance, organizational structure, policies, best practice dimension, ethics is very important in cyber, looking at the legal side of cyber and all the recent regulations, insurance dimension related to human factors, awareness, technical dimension, which we all know about, and an audit dimension. And that's not all the aspects within cyber, and just some of them. This is just to show the breadth of the topic which cybersecurity should cover. As I've mentioned, cyber is a very complex discipline, and the reason is that it builds on top of other disciplines. Of course, the strongest, probably the strongest basis for cybersecurity is computer science. Of course, as a kind of fundamentally technical discipline or initially technical discipline, computer science would play quite a significant role, and it's certainly one of the main foundations for cyber. But at the same time, disciplines such as mathematics, psychology, business studies, software engineering law and politics, they all contribute to cybersecurity, and there are strong overlaps with those particular domains. Like in psychology, for example, social engineering, online behavior of end users, reaction to certain security policies, and things like that, they would be on the overlap of cyber and psychology. With business studies, it's looking at risk management approach to cybersecurity, impact on business from cyber attacks, and things along those lines. Of course, with computer science, you can think of virtualization, networks, and operating systems, and all those concepts being key contributing concepts to cyber. So that is why it's such a complex discipline. It's not just a discipline on its own, and you cannot simply drop off all the other overlaps. You have to think about all those aspects as well. To help us to understand the structure maybe of cybersecurity as a domain a little bit better, we can refer to the cybersecurity body of knowledge. So I have a link to the website, quite a recent development by the University of Bristol. And what they did, they split cybersecurity, which I said is a very complex discipline. They've split it into 19 different knowledge areas. And that probably helps to understand the complexity better and to see, maybe if you're interested in cyber, to see which particular area of cybersecurity you're more interested in. And today I'm giving you an introduction to cybersecurity as a domain altogether. And in the second part, we will be focusing on web application security, which sits over here on the overlap of system and software security. So have a look at the website if you're interested in cyber a little bit more, if you want to learn more and interested in a particular area of cyber, you can look at specific knowledge areas to find out what is happening within that area. Some characteristics of cybersecurity which I wanted to highlight are complexity, diversity, and constant evolution. There is a massive shortage of qualified cybersecurity professionals in the world. So the demand is much higher than the supply. So universities are not able to train that many, to educate that many, and to prepare that many experts as industry needs. And those are the reasons why it's such a complex, why it's such a difficult thing to do. So complexity, as I said, cybersecurity is not just a discipline on its own. Before you can secure an information system or computer system, you need to understand how the system works. So in a sense, you need to become a computer science expert before you can become a cybersecurity expert. And that, of course, adds to complexity of the discipline. It's diversity. It's not just one single thing that you need to know, but you need to look much broader at all the implications and the integration with different disciplines around the technical side of things. And it's constant change. You know that the threat landscape evolves very rapidly, and any cybersecurity professional just has to stay up to date and look at the newly emerging threats almost on a daily basis. Security mindset, which I mentioned earlier. For understanding cybersecurity, the set of questions to consider would include: how does the system work? What are the possible vulnerabilities? What are the weaknesses within the system? How the harm to the system could be prevented? Is it possible to detect and prevent an attack? And what are the best ways to respond to it? How can we learn from mistakes? How can we prevent similar mistakes and attacks happening in the future? So that kind of set of questions would be in mind of every cybersecurity specialist. So I wanted to discuss the rules of what I call a cybersecurity game. So when we have an attacker and a defender, if we think about it as a game, so a defender must protect the system and deal with the consequences of attack for the duration of the entire system life cycle. However, an attacker has a much sort of easier goal because they can attack at any time. They don't have to follow the system throughout its life cycle. Defender must defend all points. An attacker can choose only one, the weakest point, to attack a system. A defender can defend only against known attacks. An attacker would constantly be looking and probing for new unknown vulnerabilities. Defender must be constantly vigilant. An attacker can strike at will at any point in time. Defender must play by the rules and abide the law, where an attacker can play dirty and doesn't have to follow any rules at all. So I mention it all and probably sounds very negative and sounds a very unfair game for defenders of the system. But I think at the same time, it's what makes cybersecurity an interesting field of research and practice, because there are things which are probably not fair and which makes the job quite hard. What I was going to mention is a set of key concepts. I've got the definitions on the slides. If you're interested, you can look at them later on to understand them better. But what I wanted to highlight is that for a cyber attack to happen, there should be three elements in place. There should be an asset, something of value for the company. It may be some intellectual property, it may be a computer system or computer network that needs protection. It may be some human resources as well. So something of value for the company. There should be a vulnerability within that system, which really is just a weakness which allows an attacker to get through. And there should be a threat, really a person or a system who would have some malicious intent in mind and who would try to violate the policies of that system. So those three elements, asset, vulnerability, and threat, I would say are the key concept of cybersecurity. And when we have those three elements, so risk may arise, and risk is when a vulnerability, a threat misuses a vulnerability, exploits vulnerability, and as a result, there is a negative impact on an asset would happen. So I'll go through I went through the definitions, so I'll just leave you with that information. And both the threat and vulnerability, they could be both external and internal to the company. Don't just think that kind of the threat could be sitting outside of the organization. Human error is one of the typical threats, and just a simple error could become a threat to a system. So some key concepts, the key concepts, of course, include confidentiality, integrity, and availability in cybersecurity. And they refer to unauthorized information release or unauthorized access to the system. It refers to integrity and accuracy of information and the integrity. And availability, of course, refers to unauthorized denial of use or generally availability of system to authorized users. So those three are the keystones, really, the key concepts within cybersecurity. So another key concept is security countermeasure. So there is quite a wide range of countermeasures. As we discussed, cyber is not just a technical topic. And in addition to technical countermeasures, it would include administrational, legal, and human-focused countermeasures. So I have this little list at the end. In terms of the countermeasures, and one of the final key concepts that I wanted to discuss is the approach known as the Swiss cheese model within cybersecurity. And it would really look like a set of layers of protection for, shall we say, a secret stored online. So any sensitive information or any information at all may be protected by different countermeasures of different types, or maybe several countermeasures of the same type. And an attack could only happen when there are holes in all of those layers of protection. Of course, if there is a hole in just one layer and the other 2 or 3 layers protect your system properly, nothing will happen. However, there may be situations where all layers of protection would have some holes within them, some weaknesses, some vulnerabilities, and only in that case an attack may be successful and result in a negative effect, negative impact on business. So this is known as the Swiss cheese model of cybersecurity. So finally in this section, so I was going to bring up the difference between security goal and security countermeasure. If we think about security goals, it's the what's of cybersecurity, what we want to achieve at the strategic business level. And security countermeasures are the hows, how we want to achieve it, specific tools, specific tactic, policies, and techniques for protecting information. So this is our first section focused on the key principles of cyber. So we'll have a quick 4-minute break. I'll have a look at the questions if there are any in the chat. Otherwise, just have a little time off screen, 3 minutes now, and come back at 20 to 3.
Thank you very much, Yulia. I can't see any questions in the chat at this point in time, but feel free to send in your questions as we're going. That was a really interesting overview of cybersecurity, and I didn't realize it was so broad, to be honest. So yeah, no, it's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So I'll see you in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's hope that everyone is back now. So we had a short break just to rest our eyes from looking at the screen all day long. So let's move to the next section. So let me know if it's any good, if you have any comments, if it's relevant at all. So it would be nice to know if you want to know something else, just drop me a message, drop a question in the chat or in the Q&A function, just to let me know what I need to address. So in the second part of this session, we will talk about web application security. And that is the area where we are thinking about running a new CPD course later this year. So have a look at this section. Let me know if you are interested in this section or anything around this area. So web application security, and really the material in this session is based on the module that we teach at the National Software Academy. We've been polishing this material over the last 5 years. With web application security, I gave you some brief introduction to the key concepts, and we'll need those concepts later on in this section. So web application security is a branch of cybersecurity which particularly focuses on security of web applications and web services, as it is quite clear from the title. So this is one of the 19 knowledge areas within cybersecurity. It is, of course, based on the principles of software security, and it applies them to web applications. It is quite rapidly grows and change because it's quite a new area as well as the cybersecurity altogether. Holistic approach to protecting web application is something that I wanted to highlight before talking about examples of particular attacks. If you look at this diagram here, so we have secure networks, we have secure hosts, and secure applications as 3 layers within the structure, within the architecture of an information system. Protection related to securing the application, including presentation layer, the business logic, and the database access layer. That's what web app security would cover. There are, of course, overlaps with other layers, but really securing the host would be a separate topic. So it would be related to securing operating systems, hardening OSs, patches, updates, accounts, access control, auditing, and logging within those operating systems and host machines. And then the outer layer is network security, really things related to firewalls, to network segmentation, to encrypted traffic, and all things along the line with network security. As well as I brought up initially the importance and multidisciplinary nature of cybersecurity altogether, and the need for holistic approach to cybersecurity as a discipline. The same principle applies to application security, where we could not just limit protection to protecting the app itself, the code within the app, but we really need to think about protecting the outer layers, including the host machine, the servers running the application, and protecting the network which the application runs within. So the same key terminology applies within web app security, things like vulnerability and threat. There are 2 new terms that I wanted to introduce here, and the one is attack vector, and really it's the path by which a cyber criminal attempts to gain access to the system. It's just one possible route to violate the system. An attack, which is a malicious action, is just enacting a threat and exploiting a vulnerability, and it may result in a negative impact on the asset and on business as a whole. So another term is attack surface, and really it's just the sum of all attack vectors. The more attack vectors you have, the larger is your attack surface. And one of the main principles in cybersecurity is minimizing this attack surface, reducing it down to make sure that there are no possible routes through your system. One of the examples here, and it's based on OWASP standard, OWASP documentation. So looking at this picture, we can see that the threat agent, and this is really in red, is just one possible path to get to resources in an authorized fashion. So there will be a possible attack vector, one possible way into the system, which would misuse or misuse one of the weaknesses, one of the vulnerabilities within a system. There will be a set of controls protecting a system, and this is where our Swiss cheese model sits. But there will be some weaknesses in one or in more than one controls that are in place. And if an attacker and threat agent could misuse a weakness, get through the controls, then some technical impact would be made on a system. For example, an asset may become unavailable, or a particular function within a system will become unavailable. And this ultimately will result in some business impact, some impact on the system, and through the system, some impact on business. Of course, different paths, different attacks would have different impact on the system. Some may have no impact at all, but some attacks may have a very serious impact. For example, ransomware could make the entire system unavailable for days on end until either the ransom is paid or until the system and the data are restored. So similarly, for example, a SQL injection or any type of user input attack may result in a negative impact. In this case, the attack itself, it would be an input attack. The weakness would be, for example, poor user or weak user input validation. The security control, as an example, it may have been a JavaScript validation of data, which was switched off and disabled. JavaScript validation could be disabled from the browser, hence the application was without any user input validation, and then a particular function was violated, and for example, a database became unavailable due to a SQL injection attack, and this had a real impact, could have a real impact on business, where entire web application became unavailable and customers were not able to use the system. So this is one of the examples of a web application attack. So there are plenty of real life examples. We can think about multiple attacks on LinkedIn, and there is one mentioned here. I think it happened in 2012. Millions of customer records and passwords leaked, all the sensitive data. All the passwords were hashed, so they had some countermeasure in place, but the problem was that the hashes, they did not use salts on the hashes, so there was a straight relation, so it was the relation between a password and a hash was deterministic, and really the only thing, the only unknown variable within that was a password itself, which was quite easy to be figured out by the attackers. It could be done through rainbow tables or through simple brute force attack. So that's exactly what happened in that particular scenario. Talk attack, again, massive fine from Information Commissioner's Office, lots of credit card, sensitive financial details stolen. And the reason for that was a pretty simple SQL injection attack with the use of denial, distributed denial of service diversion on top to distract attention of system administrators. So that really happens. So web application vulnerabilities could cause quite a significant impact on business. Looking at the recent statistics, here's from the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures report, we can see that executing code is one of the popular vulnerabilities. Overflow attacks are still popular. We have cross-site scripting, again, as one of the popular attacks, and of course, denial of service. That's the statistics that you can always find online just to see what's happening in this particular area. As you can see, there is a gradual growth of different types of attacks. New attacks emerge, some become more popular at some points in time, but overall there is a consistent increase in the number of exploits and vulnerabilities. So in unprecedented times that we are having with the pandemic, in 2020, the number of web app attacks really increased dramatically. It's 800% more than it was in the previous year. People started to use web applications more and more people rely on web applications and do more activities in the cyber world, and obviously cyber criminals try to misuse it even more and attack more applications. I have quite a range, quite a list of different vulnerabilities and attacks, possible attacks on web applications. Some of it is based on the OWASP standards. Some come from different documentation, but this is just to say that there is a huge number of vulnerabilities within web application, and that's something that needs researching, that needs looking at, and protection of web applications is very important and interesting topic. I think I'm nearly finished with the slides, with the material. So what I was gonna mention is that we are planning a 5-week CPD course focused on web application security. So we are quite flexible, and we will certainly try to tailor the course for people attending, those who are interested. We will look at who we have signed up for the course, and we try to tailor the level and the complexity of the course for the attendees. So generally, the course is quite technical. It would be for software developers, for web application developers who want to improve their knowledge of cybersecurity and improve their cybersecurity skills. It will be a very hands-on module. It's not just us talking to you about the theory of cyber, but actually showing you how certain attacks could take place and how practically a web application could be secured from possible attacks. I've got a little short form. If anyone is interested in a course, I will post the link to a market research form. I will stop sharing my screen, and I will share it in the chat function. And if you're interested in a CPD course on cybersecurity, you can fill in that form. You can use it for providing feedback as well from this session. Just let me know, and you can send the questions through that form later on. Okay. So that's all the material that I have for you for today. We have a couple of minutes for questions. If there are any questions, feel free to send them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Yulia. That was really very interesting, and I certainly learned a lot today, so thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just having a look in the chat facility now. Be great if anyone wants to send in any questions using the Q&A function. I'm sure we've got a few minutes yet that Yulia would be happy to take some questions. whilst we're waiting, I just thought I would also ask a question of my own, Yulia. You mentioned about sort of attack surface and reducing the attack surface. How do you actually go about that in practice?
Implementing more security countermeasures. So let's say if we talk about web application security, removing all the unnecessary input fields. So, you know, when you have a form, you just enter your data. So we only should take the data which is absolutely required. And if we have any fields for entering the data, every single field should be protected. There should be a proper input validation placed on every field. And this could be done at different layers. It could be done at the front end, in the middle tier, and at the back end, depending on the kind of the sensitivity of information and criticality of the system. It may be one layer of protection, or maybe protecting and doing input validation at all three, or at least at 2 layers.
Okay, great, thank you. Is that something that might sort of be covered a little bit more in depth on the full course?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
I was just saying, is that something that might be covered a little bit more in depth on the full course?
Yes, absolutely. In the full course, we'll give more examples. I think I had it on the list. So we will be looking at authentication and authorization. That would be another attack vector. So protecting against unauthorized access. We have information leakage. We have direct object references, general injection vulnerabilities, including but not limited to SQL injections, cross-site request forgery attacks, cross-site scripting, and setting up encryption in transit and encryption at rest. That is a set of countermeasures that we plan to look at, and obviously within every countermeasure and threat which it prevents, we will talk about other ways of reducing attack surface as well.
Okay, it sounds really comprehensive and very interesting. Thank you. We've got a question from Gareth Williams. He's asking about your research, Yulia. Does your research find value in WAF or WAF software products? And is there a benefit of this software sitting within the virtual appliance or instance of the application delivery controller?
So my research is not within the area of web application security. My research relates to risk management and governance of cybersecurity. But in my teaching of web app security, we don't really cover WAF products. So it's not something that we explicitly cover, but if there is an interest, we can probably look at it within the forthcoming CPD.
Thank you. Sorry, we lost you slightly there at the end, but I think we managed to get.
All right.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, that's better. Thank you. That's great. So unless anybody has any other questions. Oh yes, so we've got a further question here. Great, thank you. Just wondering about ransomware. My employer was hit by that in late 2019. Is this kind of attack getting more popular, Yulia? And what are your suggestions for companies and individuals to avoid or defend against kind of those type of attacks?
Absolutely. So ransomware, so it's absolutely crazy now. One of the most popular attacks recently is ransomware. It's all over the place. If you think about WannaCry, which hit NHS not long ago, I think that's when everyone became aware about ransomware. So the problem with ransomware, you don't necessarily have to be targeted by ransomware. Some companies may be hit just not as an accident, but simply because ransomware sent to millions of companies, and just accidentally you may be hit because you have a vulnerable system within your infrastructure. Because some companies, and I guess that relates to the second part of my answer. How can you prevent ransomware attacks happening? So one and the most important thing is attitude. Smaller companies, for example, they think, okay, no one is going to target me. I'm quite small. I'm not going to do anything about ransomware. And that's the problem in itself, because as I said, company does not have to be targeted. It may be hit just as a side effect of that ransomware being sent so broadly. So in terms of the protection is, of course, having all the appropriate systems in place. And you can start from simple things like looking at cyber essentials, for example, proposed by NCSC, National Cyber Security Center. And it's simple things as having firewall in place, it's having anti-malware protection and things like that. So following government guidance on protecting systems, starting with basic things like cyber essentials may be a good step forward. But keeping your systems up to date, keeping your systems patched, and generally understanding that it's a threat that any business can be hit by.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive, really interesting. So I don't think we've got any more questions, but thank you again. It's been a really interesting session this afternoon. Also, just to mention, I saw that the MSc in cybersecurity has recently been sort of endorsed certified by the UK National Cyber Security Centre. So that's really great. And that's available on a part-time basis as well as a full-time basis, I understand, over 3 years as well as 1 year. So that might be something of interest. I've put details of that in the chat in case anyone's interested.
Yeah, we're absolutely delighted that the program has been certified. It's a UK level recognition of the quality of the program. So we are now on the same list with other respectable universities and courses. So it's finally been recognized. So we are very pleased about this recognition.
Oh, congratulations and thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to bring the session to a close now, but thanks everybody for attending. I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. The sun's shining here where I am, so enjoy the weekend as well. And as I say, thanks again for attending, and thanks, Yulia, for your session.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay,
thank you, everyone, for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.